the coach never guaranteed me anything. He said that you show up and try out, it's like pretty much on you. I'm not going to guarantee you anything. So we took the risk, drove out to Connecticut, and did a 1 week tryout period, practice with the team every day.
What's up, hockey players? Welcome back to another episode of the Hockey Review Podcast. Today, I'm joined here with Jazz Krivtsov.
Thanks for
having me.
How you doing today? I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it, yeah.
So today, we're just going to talk about just your career, how you got started playing hockey in LA, and then your path from junior to college now. So what's awesome. Your, so could you give a little brief overview of how you started playing here in SoCal?
Sure. So I'll preface, I'm from the Los Angeles area. I grew up playing youth hockey here and primarily getting into hockey. My dad, who actually is from the Soviet Union, obviously now Russia, he grew up playing the sport before he came to the US, and that kind of was ingrained in us from a young age. We started skating around 6 or 7. And when I say we, I mean me and my brother, my younger brother, Tyler, who was also a goalie at the University of Alaska Anchorage. So he's playing Division I now. So that was kind of the journey of beginning from my dad. That was the inspiration. And
Was hockey like your first sport that you got into, or like was it kind of like a secondary sport? Like when did you kind of decide at that age, I want to be a hockey player?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm sure being in California, you have access to so many different sports. And I know for me at a young age, basketball was a big one. Soccer was a big one. We actually played tennis at a young age as well, and kind of trying all of these different sports. None of them really stuck for us. And we didn't really enjoy the sport itself. It was just more forced from our parents to actually get into the sport. And when hockey came along, when I was 7, my dad introduced it to me, and I actually distinctly remember the exact time that I first laced up the skates. It was during a public session in Vegas at that rink. I forgot the name of the rink, but I remember just throughout the whole day, just the scorching heat of Vegas being 110 degrees during a July peak season of the summer, and just being so relieved walking into the rink. Obviously super cold conditions, and that was like my safe haven. I'm like, thank God I made it to the rink, and I'm able to, I don't know, it was very relieving. So I think that was kind of the inspiration, I guess, at the time of getting into hockey, just based on that, getting away from the heat, because we were based in Vegas for that one summer. And during that free skate, I really enjoyed it, and just being on the ice, it was like my natural place, and I instantaneously fell in love with the sport. And from free skating, got into youth hockey programs, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But yeah, that was the initial attraction, and that's why I picked hockey as my main sport. That initial love for those temperatures. I know it sounds silly, but and then also with the inspiration of my dad, and I really just did enjoy the game, enjoyed different aspects of the competitive nature, and also at a young age, just being with my brother on the ice too, and doing something that was completely novel and new.
Yeah, I think part of the allure of hockey is you play a sport that's kind of outside of the normal world almost. We're on ice, we're in the cold, for sure. Especially like you said in Vegas. It's just just so different.
Right.
It's such a different sport. It's nothing like it. I think that's kind of what drew me to it too. It's just just how unique it is on its own. And I think I totally see your point, why it was just so cool at a young age. I'm on skates, I'm on ice.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so cool. But I totally get that. But then you grew up playing youth hockey here, right?
Yeah.
And then so then you played club here. You gone to AA travel, right?
Yeah. So I'll talk you through that process. And I did leave eventually to play prep school in Minnesota, which we'll also touch on. But before all that, my first ever youth hockey team was the Pasadena Maple Leafs. And I know we talked before the podcast, that was also one of your first teams that you played on too.
That's right.
So small world. But yeah, that was my first ever youth hockey team, which I played squirts at. So that was around the age of, I think, 11 or 12. And ever since then, I moved to Santa Clarita, and I played for the Valencia Flyers for my Pee-wee years. So I did two years of Pee-wees at the Valencia Flyers, and then also a year of Bantam. So my first year of Bantam, I was in Valencia as well. And it was nice because we live in Santa Clarita, so the rink is 10 minutes down the street. So it was very convenient in that sense. They had a very good program as well. And we were super competitive. We always had good teams. And that level, at the Pee Wee level, I believe I played Pee Wee A. I honestly, I
Wow.
believe so. It's so long ago, I don't remember the exact level, but yes, I believe it was Pee Wee A. So yeah, and then Bantam, first year Bantam, I played Bantam AA. And then second year Bantam, I played Bantam AA for the Ventura Mariners, which is, at the time, it's the same organization as the Simi Valley Titans. But the Simi Valley Mariners was the AA organization under that branch. So I did my age out year of Bantam at the Ventura Mariners. And then for 16s, my first year of 16s, I stuck with that organization, played for the Titans, and then ultimately shipped off to Shattuck for the rest of my high school career and midget career.
And then, I mean, Shattuck, like that's honestly like the pinnacle of like hockey, like
Yeah.
prep schools anywhere, honestly. So what was it like going from playing California hockey to over to Shattuck and just seeing what the culture is like there?
Yeah, so the transition was definitely tough at first. And as we all know, hockey in California is not as much of an emphasis as in Minnesota, specifically at Shattuck. That's the cream of the crop in terms of developing talent. And it's the place that you want to be if you want to aspire to play professional hockey. So it was definitely a learning curve, accustoming myself to that culture and being fully committed to being a hockey player, because I really had to make that commitment internally, not only on the athletic side of things, but also on the school side of things, and finding that balance between being a student athlete and competing at a high level against other student athletes that will go on to play in the NHL and various Division I programs. So it was very ultra competitive. That was probably the biggest takeaway coming from California to Minnesota, and it was definitely intimidating. I'm sure you kind of had the same experience going out east.
Yeah, totally.
But all in all, it taught me a lot of lessons, and beyond hockey, it's a great life lesson, honestly, just putting yourself in an uncomfortable position and making something out of that.
Yeah, I'm sure it was just, you were way out of your comfort zone there.
Yeah.
I think being at Shattuck, I'm sure you can touch more on it. Like, I'm just the competitive nature, like you're playing with guys who are like, future NHLers, playing, D1 guys. Like, I'm sure that affected you. That kind of pushed you to like get to that next level. I'm sure, like, just being in that environment, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm always a firm believer in, to become the best, you have to surround yourself with the best. You're a product of your environment. And putting myself in that position, surrounded with those individuals, from the athletes to the coaching staff to the teachers, you have this infrastructure around you that supports your development as a young man, a hockey player, and a student, and it forces you to become the best version of yourself.
Yeah, and then from there, I'm sure, like, you have so many memories from Shattuck, I'm sure. And then from Shattuck, what was like the recruitment process like going to junior hockey? What was that like?
Yeah, so mine in particular was pretty interesting. So when I graduated, it was actually when COVID hit. So it was 2020.
Really?
And I remember being at school right after we got back from spring break, and administration sent out an email basically saying that the school year's over. So our nationals was canceled, and at that time, I didn't have a college commitment. I didn't have a commitment to a junior team. So that nationals was a amazing platform for me to go, and obviously for the team to win a championship, but also to focus on my development and play super well in front of the various scouts that will be there. So that would have been a huge opportunity for me. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, obviously, because of COVID. Then we went into the hiatus. We were on lockdown. So no one really knew what was happening in the hockey world. And during that season, I was recruited by the Connecticut Junior Rangers in the NCDC. And my goal was to play in either the BCHL or the NAHL. But my thought process was, with Canada and getting over the Canadian border, I didn't want to take that risk of going to try out for teams for that upcoming season. So around May, I committed to the Connecticut Junior Rangers. I talked to their coaching staff, and they were pretty confident about having a season the following year. So I was like, why not? This is a safety valve. I'm going to just take the spot here and make the most of it. But yeah, it was an interesting time period for not only me, but everyone in the hockey community, because of the uncertainty that that time period posed. But yeah, ultimately went to the junior Rangers for that season right after Shattuck.
What was that difference like though from prep school hockey to junior hockey? Was it like a huge jump that you saw? Like what was the biggest jump that you or difference you saw?
Yeah, again, to answer that question completely honestly, we played 4 games up until the beginning of the season to Christmas break because of the COVID hiatus.
Oh,
Games
so
kept
you're
getting
like,
canceled. So it
yeah,
was
it's
really
brutal.
hard to
Yeah.
gauge what that level was actually like. And there was a lot of players that were some of the best players on those teams that we played. They couldn't play because they had COVID restrictions or they were sick or something. So you didn't really actually get to gauge the level of play. But from what I remember, it was good hockey. There was a lot of prep school kids on my Connecticut team, and I know there's a lot of prep school kids in the league as well. I think the NCDC is pretty notorious for recruiting prep schoolers. So in terms of the transition from prep to the NCDC, I think the level was pretty comparable. But obviously the NCDC, you're working with kids that are 19 to 21 in prep school. It's midget hockey, you're under 18. So physicality aspect comes into play, speed, intensity, professionalism, and also the sense of living on your own. You kind of have to navigate your day-to-day life. And some kids, quite frankly, don't adjust to that as well as they did in a prep school environment where everything was curated for them. You knew exactly where you had to be at a certain time. But in juniors, you have large chunks of your day that you basically have the freedom to do whatever you want. So you really have to be mature in that sense and prioritize time management and just making the best of that situation.
Did you already start taking like classes, like college classes going into, or I know some kids, it's like you mentioned earlier, you got to like know how to budget your day because you have a lot of free time in junior. It's a very important like lesson a lot of kids need, learn. So did you end up taking classes at all?
I did actually. So I took one class throughout that year in the NCDC, and then my age out year in Danbury, which we'll get into, I took another class as well. And I think that's a super important thing that I'd actually recommend to most kids that are going into junior hockey. Do your gen eds and juniors because it's so much easier and you have all that free time while you're playing juniors. Just put in like whatever, a couple hours a day, and it will compound into you completing that course in an efficient manner over the course of the junior season. And it gives you something to do. I know a lot of, and myself included, like sometimes you'd be racking your brain with the amount of free time that you have. You really just don't know what to do at that time. So that's a good way to use your time efficiently, and it will compound into getting yourself credits before entering your freshman year of college.
I think when you were playing juniors for the Rangers, it was during that bubble.
Yeah.
That bubble, like how was that like? I know it's a very unique experience that only kids during COVID could have.
Yeah, so when I think back on my hockey career, I think of the bubble as one of the most unique and novel experiences that I've ever faced in my hockey career for multiple reasons. But no one's ever done a platform like that before, put on an event like that where you're living in Florida in a bubble for 2 months, not just the league, but also different aspects of the hockey community. I know that you have the NCAA players, the Ivy League players that didn't play that season. They were also living in the bubble, and they were training and skating out of that same rink that we were playing at. So you have all of these different people and levels of players coming into not to the NCDC, but into the bubble, into Florida. And it was just a really interesting experience. And it was honestly a lot of fun. I mean, I talked about free time and before the bubble, when we were playing 4 games up until Christmas break in Connecticut. And again, you had so much free time, you didn't really know what to do with your time. But in the bubble, it seemed like you were always doing something. We pretty much played every other day or every couple days. So we played a lot of games, and we were on a resort, which we're super grateful to experience that. There was a pool. There was actually 2 golf courses on the resort. So we were golfing by the pool. There's a gym. And if we weren't doing that, we were either playing games or practicing. So there was always something to do. And it was pretty cool too, because like I mentioned, everyone from the league was in one place. So if you have friends on other teams, you can go hang out with those guys. And it was just like kind of a vacation in a sense, but at the same time, like when you're on the ice, you mean business. So you kind of have the duality of those two things going on at the same time. But in terms of the level of play, it was unbelievable. You have all of the guys that came from the BCHL with Division I commitments coming back to the NCDC. You have USHL drop downs. I think on average, like every team in the NCDC had at least like 5 or 6 Division I commits.
So it was like stacked. Like that was
Very
like
stacked.
stacked time for the NCDC. Yeah.
Yeah, very stacked. The NCDC, I would honestly say, it was never at that point in terms of the Division I recognition that the league had, and that was just like to the max. And I'm super lucky I got to experience that, because I think it did play a pretty important role in my development as a hockey player, just being around those Division I guys, and also just competing for a lineup spot too, being pushed and challenged to bring my best daily to the ice. And there's that added level of pressure of playing against the best on the other teams and being able to perform, because if you're not going to perform, you're not going to play, because the lineup's just that much more competitive.
Yeah, of course. And now moving from the NCDC, now let's talk about the NAHL.
Yeah.
What was that? When did you decide, like, okay, now it's the next step for me to take to go to the NAHL?
Yeah.
What was that transition like?
No, for sure. And as I mentioned before, the NCDC isn't notoriously known for producing Division I commitments. That bubble year was kind of an enhanced experience in that sense. But I knew once the bubble ended and kind of COVID regulations came back to place, and guys that were playing in the BCHL are now able to go back to the BCHL, and players in the NAHL were whatever. Like, what I'm trying to say is the Division I opportunities in that league weren't as accessible as it was for players in the NAHL, at least being an age out. So that was kind of my thought process, getting to the North American League and talking to my agent as well. That was his strategic advice: go back to the North American League, and said, if you put up this amount of points or produce this amount statistically, you'd have a very fair shot at going Division I. And he sold me on that idea. And I also had friends that played in the NA as well, and they said nothing but the best things about it. So I was like, why not? Like, I'm going to be an age out. This seems like the place to be if you're going to be an age out and go for a Division I commitment. So I ultimately ended up in Minot to start the year. Had a short stint there, did preseason, went to the showcase, didn't have my best showcase, and then Minot decided to release me. And this is kind of a long story.
Like, I'm sure it's hard to hear that though.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You're released, like, you're like, oh, I came all the way. And
yeah, definitely devastating. And I was unsure of the direction that I wanted to go. And honestly, this is a pretty interesting story, going from Minot to Danbury.
Mm-hmm.
It might take a little bit, but I'll just tell it.
No, tell us.
Yeah. So I got cut from Minot, and I had a team in the NCDC. So obviously I was with Connecticut before, but they traded my rights to Utica. So I had the option of going back to the NCDC since Minot cut me. I didn't have a team in the NA anymore. So I drove from Minot to Minnesota. At the time, we had a house there, and my brother was playing for Fairbanks, and they're based out of Minnesota. So my whole family was there. So I drove back there to our property there and kind of sat down with my parents and tried to strategize the best move possible. And again, I didn't really want to go back to the NCDC at the time. I wanted to somehow try to find a way back in the NA. And my good friend, who I went to Shattuck with, he had a connection in Danbury, and he actually played there. And I know that at the time they weren't the best team. After the showcase, they had a rough showcase, so they were looking to release some guys. So lineup spots opened up, and he texted me, hey, reach out to the coach. I think we could work something out. And then the coach was a Shattuck alum as well, so there's that connection. So I reached out to him, and basically, long story short, I drove from Minnesota to Connecticut without a guarantee with my dad. Yeah, with my dad. So we did it's like a 2-day trip, drove out to Connecticut, but the catch is the coach never guaranteed me anything. He said that you show up and try out, it's like pretty much on you. I'm not going to guarantee you anything. So we took the risk, drove out to Connecticut, and did a 1-week tryout period, practice with the team every day, and just hope for the best, honestly. And luckily I got the call back from Billy McCreary, that's the coach's name, that he wanted to take me on the team. And that's how I found my way back in the NA from being cut from Minot.
Wow, that's a crazy story, honestly, because it's like a story where, like, you're you're trying this place, that place, and it's not guaranteed.
Right.
Like nothing was guaranteed, right? And that's kind of the scary part about it, but obviously the most rewarding when you finally make it. You're like, oh, I earned it.
Right. And I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from junior hockey, honestly. And I think that's why it's such a good life development beyond being a hockey player, but being a young man too, just going through perseverance and overcoming obstacles. And you're right, like there's always that uncertainty in juniors, being cut from a team, not performing, and not having certainty in
Your future, right?
Yeah, future, right?
Yeah.
So being able to navigate that and come out of that experience on top, it'll shape you into a tremendous person, and it will give you a lot of grit and determination for sure.
Yeah, and then I think your age out season at Danbury, you put up great numbers, right? You were
Right. Yeah.
You were good, one of their top players.
Right. Yeah. And again, like coming from humble beginnings, driving out to the team, I wasn't even on the team, and then making the team. I worked hard and got an opportunity on one of the top lines there. And at first I started on the bottom six, had to kind of like pay my dues. And then one of the kids he was an international kid, he actually went back to, I think, Sweden. And he was a top six guy, and he played very similarly to the way I played, lefty shot, left winger. And again, it was kind of created through opportunity. Billy gave me a call and he said, hey, our guy just left for Sweden, so a spot opened up in the top six. I'm going to try you on this line. And that game, I played super well, had 2 points, and the next game I had like an assist or two, and I had a really productive weekend with that line. And it's just kind of been, ever since then, just kind of rode that momentum throughout the rest of the year and played super well, and had a lot of chemistry and success with my line. So,
and then that's awesome. And then, I mean, from there, I'm sure you're this whole time you're kind of thinking about college, right? Like, what's that picture looking like in the back of your head now? Like, have you been talking to coaches the whole time? Like, what was your college sort of like outlook looking like?
Yeah. So ultimately, like I mentioned before, my age out year, my goal was to play Division I hockey, and that I think is the goal for most players entering junior hockey. And that year was particularly tough from a recruitment standpoint because you had one of the last year of the fifth years. So you still had that in place. Guys can take fifth years, which limits roster spots. And then you also have the transfer portal, which I think at the time there was over 230 players in the portal at the time. So it was really tough for a guy from the NA, an age out specifically, to get that commitment. But yeah, I mean, ultimately throughout the year,
you were talking to coaches, you were still networking, I'm sure.
For sure. Yeah. And like I mentioned, I had an agent as well. So he kind of put some feelers out there, and he had connections in the Division I space. I did talk to a few schools after games here and there, both Division III and Division I, but nothing really fermented and stuck. And I never really got an offer from a Division I university. So that's why I opted into Division III, which is still an unbelievable level, very high level of hockey. But at that time, Division I was my goal.
Yeah, I mean, and now like with the whole CHL rule change, I think D3 is even going to get better.
Yeah.
Because the trickle-down effect, like those players who are kind of on the bubble of D1, they'll go D3, and just from, so on. I think it's going to be hard to make D3 now. It's not, like, agree. Would you say? Like,
yeah, for sure. And I think D3 is increasingly going to become a better league as a whole, holistically.
Totally.
And you're right with the CHL thing. There's a much bigger talent pool to choose from when recruiting kids, especially for Division I schools. Now you have over 1,200 kids from the CHL now eligible for NCAA hockey. So that's going to force Division I hockey to become even better as well. And what I'm hoping comes from this is expansion. Now at the time you have 65 Division I universities. If you look at a traditional sport like basketball or football, there's over 150 Division I universities. So to really put that in perspective, there's not that many Division I universities for hockey.
Like relative to
other sports, right?
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. So what I'm hoping is with this influx of talent coming into the league, and also financial backing and resources now kind of being merged between the CHL and the NCAA, I'm really hoping to see expansion into the Western Hemisphere, into the southern areas. And you see that with a school like ASU. They've kind of executed that perfectly and they were kind of like the innovators in that sense. And that program's done really well. So would love to see a program in California.
Eventually, yeah,
For
one
both
day.
of us, coming from a pretty biased perspective, it would be pretty cool to see something like that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And now you're playing college, UMass Boston. I'm sure it's a kind of a different lifestyle to junior. You know, you kind of have to kind of settle back down. You got school to worry about, less games. I'm sure it's a different kind of vibe when you're in college playing. You know, but I'm sure it's still.
Yeah, Division III hockey is an unbelievable level, and I'll be pretty biased when I say this. The conference that we play in, the NEHC, is I think the best conference in Division III. You have Hobart, who three-peated not only the conference but NCAA Division III as a whole. They won the league and the whole NCAA 3 years in a row, and then you have other teams in the league as well that are ranked in the top 15 consistently every year. So the strength of schedule is really tough. You get the best every night. Super competitive, but you're completely right when you say that it's a big adjustment going from playing 60 games a year in junior hockey to 25 to 30 max.
But like taking a step back now, like this website, the Hockey Review, is all about giving insight on what a team's like. Like, what would you say are the most important things a team should provide in terms of like a non-negotiable? Like what should a team provide, and what should parents and players look for in like a program?
Yeah, that's a great question, honestly. And I think you can touch on a lot of different things. But first and foremost, I think you need to focus on the development of the player on the ice, and in terms of their skill set, in terms of where they want to end up ultimately after that level they're playing at. So if that's the junior level, focusing on the ultimate goal being college hockey, right? If you're a parent looking to send their kid to a program, understand the track record of players that coaching staff and that program develops, and understanding where they're developing, how they're developing, what level they're being pushed to.
Oh, and you mentioned that you had an agent, right? So how much of that like had impact on your career, and would you kind of recommend that to everyone, or is it kind of you have to be very selective on what agent you or advisor you pick? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely good to be aware of who you're involving yourself with, but I will say it's a pretty subjective experience. It's different for everyone. Some players don't need agents, some do. But for myself, at least, I realized I needed an agent when I was going to Shattuck. Coming from California, I didn't have much knowledge about how junior hockey worked, how to get to the college level, what to do after Shattuck. So I really focused on having someone that can be in my corner, giving me strategic advice on my hockey career. And luckily, I'll just shout the person out. That person was Peter Torsen for me.
Oh, really?
That was your...
Yeah, it was my Bears coach. Yeah, that's right.
So he advised me and my brother at Kaizen Sports. That was the name of the agency. So he advised me throughout my high school career, and he was really good because he did video sessions with me as well. So he kind of gave that holistic perspective of not only developing me in terms of my talent and developing me on the ice, but as well as giving me advice on strategic advice on where placement for after Shattuck as well. So I think in terms of that agency space, there's so much that an agent can offer, and I really think it comes down to the individual that you're working with, because I've heard horror stories of agents that are kind of just in it to get their monthly retainer and then not really do much for the player. So
oh yeah, you hear all the time.
It's hard.
You hear all the time. I mean, yeah, I totally agree. Like a lot of not so good agents out there that you got to watch for.
It really comes down to understanding the person, doing your due diligence on them and researching them. And it would also be really helpful to meet them in person too. I know a lot of players that are represented by agents, they've never met them in person. They met them over a phone call, over Zoom. It's really important to meet your agent in person, get a sense of the energy that they portray, and also just, you can tell a lot from your first interaction with someone. So you'll have that inherent intuitive feeling about if you want to work with that person or not. But objectively, I guess it's hard to really say if everyone needs an agent. I really think it comes down to the person individually and understanding what value they can provide.
So did you always know what kind of role you had on the team?
Yeah, it's a good question, honestly, and I think it varies from team to team that I played on. From a youth level, I say that I think I picked up the game pretty fast, and I was able to adapt the necessary skills and qualities to become a successful hockey player. So within my first few years of playing, I was pretty gifted athletically. I was a good skater, had a good shot, and I picked up the game pretty fast. I was pretty effective. And then once I started moving up to higher levels, I remember specifically my first year of Bantam was particularly tough because checking was introduced. And at the time I was 5'2", 5'3", entering my first year of Bantam, and that's a pretty small size. And some kids at that age mature very quickly, some being like 5'8" up to like 6 foot. So it was kind of intimidating for myself. And it kind of deterred away from me just playing hockey. And I was worried about the physicality aspect. And that was my first real time of facing adversity in my hockey career. And that's something I had to overcome and get out of my own head.
Well, I mean, amazing. Honestly, great story. I think there's a lot of good insights, a lot of good lessons to be learned in your story. I think it's great that we're here talking about it, sharing about it on the podcast, and that's all we can really do, I think, to get back to the game. I think share these stories and kind of give a blueprint of what, or have kids learn from what we learned from, and that's the whole point. So, but thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Yeah, I appreciate you for having me on. It was a lot of fun having this conversation, and you're completely right in a sense of giving back to the community, because I wish we had this resource when me and you were growing up at a young age, and being able to have a resource like the Hockey Review and being able to look at a database of information and feedback about certain teams. It definitely would have played a role in the development as a young hockey player aspiring to play at the highest level. So I appreciate you for starting this, and I'm very excited to see what this brings in the future.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much. This is the Hockey Review podcast. Thank you, Jazz.
Thank you.